Gives it to Goligoski now. He skates with it to the top of the left circle. Back to the left point. Goligoski to the net. He scores! Alex Goligoski shooting from the left point. Hansel cruising at the top of the crease. He either screened it or maybe got a stick on it. We'll wait and see. But the Coyotes have won in overtime.
All right, Coyotes fans, welcome into another episode of Coyotes Corner alongside Dave Vest. I'm Luke Lapinski. Lots of stuff going on with the Coyotes that we're going to get into, but we want to start the show off just by quickly acknowledging and sending our thoughts and prayers to Craig Cunningham and his family, as Dave Tippett and John Chaika were able to update us with yesterday at their media availability. He is in stable but critical condition. That's all we know at this time. No point speculating or anything, but just obviously the thoughts and prayers of the team are certainly with him. He's touched a lot of the guys that play on the Coyotes and around this organization, really around the entire league. You can see the outpouring around the NHL, so we want to send our thoughts and prayers to him as well. Well, Dave, not really an easy transition away from that, but we're going to get into some of the news with this team, starting with a pretty impressive win over the San Jose Sharks on Saturday. It's the second time they've beaten the Sharks this year, who, in case you forgot, went to the Stanley Cup last year. And actually, they were the one Pacific Division team that the Coyotes had a really hard time with last season. 2-0 against them this year and finding different ways to win.
Yeah, I thought that was a huge victory for the Coyotes, especially coming into the game in the situation that they were, having lost 4 consecutive games, 2 in overtime, but still 4 losses nonetheless. We talked before the game, Luke, about how Mike Smith needed to play extremely well for the Coyotes to have a chance to win that game against the Sharks, and he did just that. I thought he was terrific. You know, Mike's just easing back into the lineup after missing a month.
Easing in with 43 save performances.
Yeah, exactly. So, great game by Mike. Marty Hansel scores the game-winning goal, which was funny because at the morning skate we talked to Marty Hansel about, you know, how does this team get out of its offensive slump, and he said to me, well, you got to get in front of the net, and you got to, take more shots. And when you do those two things, good things happen, and that's exactly what did happen.
You know, it's interesting, just specifically on that Hansel goal. Todd Walsh, for our radio broadcast, did an interview with Oliver Ekman-Larsson a couple days before, talking about how valuable Hansel is in front of the net as a target, whether he's getting a rebound or redirecting the shot or just screening the goalie or whatever. And then after that game, I talked to Alex Goligoski, and he said basically the same things Oliver said. It's just great to have a weapon like that in front that can affect a goal 3-4 different ways just by planting himself in front of the net. Marty's not easy to move. So you saw the effectiveness there. He always plays well against the Sharks too, actually, throughout his career. But you mentioned Mike Smith. The last time we were doing the show, he was still hurt. He's back. Been phenomenal.
He's back. Let's just say it. I'm declaring Mike Smith back.
But I think it's even more than just that he's playing. I mean, he's winning them games. And we discussed this throughout the preseason. He had one of the best save percentages in hockey in the preseason, but it's the preseason. But at the same time, they are games against NHL players, but you take it with sort of a grain of salt. Opening night, he was excellent against Philadelphia, especially in overtime, gave them a chance to win, and they won. And then he didn't get to play again until just recently. But when you look at the big body of work now, late last season coming back from the injury and the preseason, and now as we record this, 4 games he started, but he only made it through about half of the Ottawa game. The other 3, ironically, have all gone to overtime that he's played in. He has looked really good now for 6-7 months.
Plus in practice, we get to see practice every day that there's not a game.
Yes.
He's playing well in practice.
I think it's the black pads.
I don't want to
Those are pretty sweet.
Like Allen Iverson because
Okay.
it's practice.
Yes.
But just to watch Mike, he is engaged in being an elite goaltender. He wants to be that this year. You can see it in the games, but you can also see it in practice. He's all business out there. Not that he wasn't in the past, but it's just more noticeable to me this year because of Mike's situation having missed so much time early in the season.
I also feel like there's sort of a leadership role that he's taking on, which is always kind of tough as the goalie because you're playing your own game a lot, whether it's in practice or throughout the season. I mean, in practice, it's you against all your teammates as the goalie. But it does feel like he's really sort of taken that leadership role on because he looks around the locker room and everybody's 20 years old, other than like Shane Doan and a couple other guys. So, I mean, Mike Smith, I feel like he's, whether it's by example or even just through his actions, sometimes you'll see in practice, he'll come up and stick tap a guy and just, make sure they're engaged or whatever. I mean, he's obviously the key for this team. And I know that I've said this numerous times, but all of these games they're playing are 1-goal games. All of them. It is remarkable how I think it's 4 games all season have not been either a Coyotes win or a 1-goal loss, and one of the 4 was a 1-goal loss because it was an empty net goal by New Jersey. So 3 times this season we've entered the last minute of a Coyotes game thinking, okay, they've probably lost this one. All year. That's crazy.
That's a lot of information. I'm trying to follow you. It sounds good. I'm going to trust you on.
I'll give you the transcript of the show after.
That sounds good. Let's talk about the week ahead.
Yes.
Today is Tuesday. That's no secret.
Breaking news.
There are 3 games coming up in the immediate future. Starting on Wednesday, it's against the Vancouver Canucks. Special start time, it's 8 o'clock. So fans need to note that the game's starting an hour later than a usual weekday
on
game.
Thanksgiving. Even Dave, your bedtime's like in the second period now.
It really
so what are you going to do?
I'm going to have to set the DVR and wake up and watch the game the next morning.
Watch the home game that you're going to be here for.
And then Friday night, the Edmonton Oilers. I know you're excited about that because they are the surprise team of the league, I would say, so far. Maybe Montreal is in the conversation, but
I would say Edmonton's more surprising because, Montreal has Carey Price. When they have Carey Price, they tend to do what they've been doing this year. But it's Connor McDavid's first ever trip here, too. So I think that's certainly something to watch. There's going to be a lot of speed on the ice from both teams. Just picture a game with Max Domi and Anthony Duclair going one way and Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl going the other way. I think back to the game against Dallas last year. It was a couple games against Dallas last year, but I remember one in particular. I think the Coyotes ended up winning 6-3. Is that the correct
That sounds
score?
right.
Where Tippett after the game said, yeah, we just let our skill guys go. Just see what you can do facing a highly skilled team like Dallas. Edmonton is not on the level this year that Dallas was on last year, but skill-wise, they are in a lot of ways, just in terms of guys that can put the puck in the net. And I think the Coyotes are one of the few teams that can match their speed. So, yeah, it's going to be a fun game. And then they play them again in Edmonton 2 days later. But it's different. If you want to see Connor McDavid, it's different to see him in person than on TV.
Right. It's kind of a home-and-home series. Well, not kind of. It is.
It's the very definition of a home-and-home series.
Yes. The team will be heading up to Edmonton to play in the new building up there. For the first time, it's a Sunday matinee. But let's not get too far ahead. Okay. Let's go back to Wednesday. The opponent is the Vancouver Canucks. We just played them last week. What are you expecting in that game? The way that game last week unfolded, I was a little surprised that the Coyotes weren't able to win that game, especially considering that they had a 2-goal lead.
Yeah, okay. I've got a lot of answers for you. First of all, what am I expecting? A goal from Radim Vrbata. He had 9 shots on goal against his former team. I think he has a little extra motivation to score, and I think he will. But going to that game specifically, there's 2 things that stand out. The Coyotes, I thought, outplayed them for all but about 5 minutes. But, of course, Brad Richardson had the injury.
Right. That's a huge key.
And I know these guys are all professionals, all that stuff. And they had to refocus and go out there and play. I'm not saying that's why Vancouver won by any means, but the only 5 minutes the Coyotes seemed a little disjointed were right after that, and that makes a lot of sense. And also, Brad Richardson used to play for Vancouver. I'm not saying that was easy for the Canucks either. I thought the fans there were very classy with the whole situation. But also, Vancouver, they do that. They just hang around in games, and you'll look at, they did this last year too. They for the longest time led the NHL in overtime losses. They are good at getting to overtime, and I think the Coyotes have gone to overtime their last 3 games, so I expect a close game, and I think the Coyotes will probably pull this one out.
I would think the way the Coyotes play at home against teams of that level, they seem to be able to manage that properly.
And they're in a streak here of 8 straight games against the Pacific, and in their first 3 games, they've gotten 4 out of 6 points. If you want to make the playoffs in the Pacific Division, the way to do it is to get in the top 3. You don't want to mess with the teams in the Central right now fighting for a wild card spot. It's just better to get in the top 3, and that division is really wide open. I believe first and last are separated by 7 points, but first has played a lot more games than last.
That's right. That's a huge key. They've played many more games. It's not really. It's kind of skewed.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about these 2 games in terms of the fans, because there's some pretty cool things going on here this week. Wednesday night's game, as we mentioned, against Vancouver starts at 8 o'clock. And at this game, Luke, the Coyotes are going to be unveiling a new beverage that is being brewed specifically for the Coyotes. If you haven't guessed yet, it's a beer. The Santan Brewing Company of Chandler, Arizona, and the Coyotes have partnered together for an American Pale Ale. It's called Yotes Pale Ale, available for the first time at Gila River Arena Wednesday night.
Kind of cool. I like the creative marketing with the team. The way anytime you can get the team involved in different ways in the community that are creative. I mean, I don't remember. I certainly, obviously, the Coyotes haven't done anything like this. I don't really remember a whole lot of other teams doing anything.
Nor
like
do
this.
I.
So maybe I'm forgetting one, but if I'm forgetting them, I'm still forgetting them. The Coyotes are the only one I can think of that's done it. So yeah, that'll be cool on Wednesday. And again, Wednesday night is Thanksgiving is the very next day, so it's kind of like a holiday atmosphere. You maybe got family in town or whatever, and that is the start of the weekend really for everybody except you, Dave.
So there's more information about that at the Coyotes website, ArizonaCoyotes.com. Friday night after Thanksgiving, another throwback night, and those are always fun. I know you enjoy it, and I know that you enjoy wearing that Spice Girls t-shirt that you always seem to wear at these throwback events.
First of all, as I told you earlier, who's to say I don't wear one of those under my suit every single night? I do. I actually have a couple throwback ties that I'll break out if I have to. Maybe a little Kachina lining on the suit if that's the way it's going to be on Friday. Throwback night's great.
I'll be listening to Gin Blossoms and all those great 90s groups on my way to the arena. I always try to incorporate that into the night just to get into the fun.
I feel like you do that every night.
I kind of do.
Dave's going to have the Dumb and Dumber bowl cut for the game, too. He's going to make that sacrifice.
I'll be wearing the blue tux.
I'll be wearing the orange tux.
Perfect.
I mean, we're going to sell this. And top hat, too. Don't forget the top hat, Dave.
So if you have a Coyotes Kachina jersey from the past, this is the night to wear it because the Coyotes themselves will be wearing the black Kachina jerseys, and that's always seems to be a big hit with the fans. And the team, I don't have it in front of me, but I know they've won a couple of these throwback games.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly...
Against Vancouver was the first one,
yes,
I think.
Yeah, they've had success on those nights. This goes back to my original point. This is what got Mike Smith wearing the black pads. He's had success on those nights. He has success in the black pads. He's got to stick with those. But it is cool. I know fans have told me that fans that grew up with this team back in the mid to late 90s, and now it's a whole different generation of Coyotes. They just aesthetically, it's cool to see Jacob Chikrin in a jersey from the 90s, and it's kind of like it brings the start of this team right up to the present, just like that. It's cool. And like you said, I mean, the most important thing is they seem to play better in those situations, just more of a focus on that game.
Mike Smith wears the Alice Cooper mask. That's really cool. It's signed by him. Look closely tomorrow. If they zoom in on Mike, on the back of his head, it'll be signed. You'll see the plate that has Alice Cooper's face is signed by Alice himself.
Oh, I didn't even know that. I thought that was just painted on there. So Alice signed it. That's going. I mean, obviously he's a pretty avid Coyote supporter. He's been here on some of these throwback nights. So, yeah, that'll be fun on Friday night. That's going to be a very intriguing game. Dylan Strome?
Let's talk about Dylan Strome.
All right.
That was a big story on Monday.
Yes.
Dylan, obviously, no longer a member of the Coyotes as he was returned to his junior hockey team, the Erie Otters. They play in the Ontario Hockey League. Dylan's played there a couple seasons. He's a big star there. So the team decided, and Dylan was on board with the decision, that the best plan for him at this point was to return to junior hockey.
There's a couple things that people have asked me about this, so I'll start with those. He can't come back up this year. I know that seems like common knowledge if you're a hardcore hockey fan, but I get why some people are like, why can't they just call him back up? It is kind of a weird rule. I understand the benefits both to the NHL to have that developmental league that they don't have to pay a ton for, and I also certainly understand the benefits to the OHL because they get to keep their best players there. Ultimately, the best case scenario, I think, for Dylan Strome would have been to be able to go to Tucson, where you can call him up, send him back down, and he can work on little things. But he will not be back with the Coyotes this year. But I will say, in listening to Dave Tippett talk yesterday and talking to him a little bit as well, just I do feel better about the situation than maybe I would have 24, 48 hours ago because they were in a tough spot. They don't want to send him back to junior and run the risk of him falling into that bad habits basically that maybe aren't even his fault. Maybe his coach down there is like, we need you out there for 2.5 minute shifts or something. That's something they're trying to get out of these young players' games. But at the same time, you don't want to just keep him here and never play him. So I kind of like that they were able to keep him here for a little bit. He got into some games. He got to practice and work out with NHL players for a good month and a half. And the way Dave Tippett described it, he has sort of a checklist of things he's going to work on at the junior level now, where he's kind of like a hybrid player. He has tasted the NHL, and now he's back in the junior. And it wasn't for a week; it was for a month and a half.
Right, and a big part of this decision is the fact that the World Junior Championship is coming up at the end of December. It's in Montreal and Toronto, I believe, this year.
Yeah, so no pressure on Team Canada.
No,
I'm sure, right?
None at all. And they want Dylan to go. Presumably, he'll be part of that team and probably part of the leadership group of that team. So that was a big part of the decision. They want Dylan to have that experience. They pointed to Max Domi a couple of years ago. Same kind of situation. Some people thought Max was ready for the NHL. It was decided he wasn't. He went back, played in the World Junior, won the gold. And I believe Max has even said that, in retrospect, he's glad that that decision was made.
Yeah, it's tough in the moment for these guys because Max Domi, he carries the name of Ty Domi. He's a very flashy player in junior. He still, in a lot of ways, is at the NHL level. So it's tough to hear how great you are when you're 14 and 15 and 16, then you're a first-round pick, and then you don't make your NHL team a couple of years in a row. But for Max, it really paid off. He's just such a more well-rounded player. And it's difficult because Max could have looked around at other players in his draft class that probably weren't as good as him that were already playing, but that's more based on situation and what team you're on, and there's a lot of factors that go into it. You can't control it all. I think the biggest thing was Max handled it. I was blown away at the time with how maturely he handled it, and it sounds like Dylan's handling it the same way, and I think that's ultimately the key. You don't want to run the risk of sort of losing the player's confidence, but I don't think that's the case here.
Well, from what Dave Tippett told us, he and John Chaika and Dylan Strome had breakfast on Sunday before this was announced, and it was discussed, and the decision was told to Dylan. And from what Coach Tippett told us, he was on board 100%. He thinks it's the best path at this point for him to be what he wants to be. And a great point by Dave Tippett. He told us that Dylan Strome wants to be a great NHL player.
Yep.
Not an NHL player, a great NHL player. And they decided that this is the best path for him to achieve that.
Yeah, obviously Dylan Strome sits at that breakfast. He isn't excited that he's going back to junior, but you've talked to him, and I've interviewed him a couple times this year, and at numerous points he has said, I want to be in the NHL, but there are things I can still accomplish in junior. And, I maybe fans don't know this. You and I maybe just think of this as second nature, but Dylan Strome is such a student of the game of hockey. I think that kid only thinks about hockey. He is so intense when it comes to hockey and getting better at hockey. It didn't shock me at all when Dave Tippett said he doesn't just want to be a player that hangs around all year and plays in 35 games and can tell people he's in the NHL. He's willing to take a step back for the next couple months and be better for it in the future. And there aren't a lot of young players like that, and I'm not even saying it's their fault. Again, Dylan Strome comes in with a ton of expectations, even outside of Arizona, because he was the third pick in one of the best draft classes in recent memory. He was a teammate of Connor McDavid. He's one of his best friends. So there's a ton of expectations on him, but I like the way he's handling it, and it's not a shock if you've ever talked to him.
Okay, you mentioned Brad Richardson earlier. Quickly recapping what happened to Brad. Injured very severely in the last Vancouver game. He broke the tibia and fibula bones in his right leg.
Yeah, just kind of an awkward hit, a very large player essentially falling on him. It's a fluke thing. It's not something that, it wasn't a dirty hit. It wasn't anything like that.
I think he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
As a result, Brad had surgery the following day in Vancouver on Friday, and as we found out today, Tuesday, he has returned now to Arizona. So he is back. I think it's premature to discuss a timeline for his return.
Yeah, that's a rough
silly,
injury,
frankly.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll be seeing Brad. I know we won't be seeing him on the ice anytime soon.
Yeah, he's out indefinitely, right. And I think that's one of those injuries where people aren't even necessarily thinking about his return. They just, you want to hear that it's successful surgery, which it was, and you want to hear now that he's back home, which he is. So, those are the best case, all things considered, with what happened last Thursday night. So, if you want to look on the ice, he was playing really good hockey.
He was. He was, and he'll be missed in many ways.
Yeah.
He's a great guy in the room. He's one of the veteran leaders. He's also performing on the ice. So we wish Brad Richardson a very speedy recovery, and we hope to see him real soon.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about Anthony DeAngelo. I know we've been talking about him off mic for a couple days. Every time we get together, we seem to be talking about Anthony, and the impact he's had in his short tenure with the team.
Yeah, we're 6 games into his NHL career. He has put up a point in 4 of those 6 games. 2 goals, 2 assists, but they've been spread out over 4 of the 6 games. So it's not like he had one good game and then he's trailed off. And that's not always important for a defenseman to give their offensive numbers, but with him, I think it is. He's an offensive-minded defenseman. In a lot of ways, I think he is what the NHL is going towards and what teams are looking for in a defenseman, and that he's a puck mover that plays with confidence, he sees the ice very well, and he's not a defensive liability. And so it's obviously very early in his career. You don't want to jump to any conclusions, but he looks really good through 6 games. I mean, and he looked great in Tucson at the start of this year, too.
You know what a nice side effect of him being in there is? He's been playing with Alex Goligoski.
Yeah, and that has clicked. That duo has clicked instantly.
It really has, and we've had Dave Tippett tell us about that as well. Goligoski came in here. He had a lot of expectations given how
just his resume.
Yeah.
His NHL resume, yeah.
What I'm trying to say, he was courted to come here, and he arrived, and the season started a little slow for Alex, and he'll tell you that.
Yeah.
But recently, having been paired with Anthony DeAngelo, the two of them just really seem to complement each other very well.
Yeah, that's a great point, because you never know. I was talking to somebody that just walked down the hall, not you. Sorry, Dave, that was awkward. No, I mean, you look at what the Coyotes had to do over this past summer, and there was a certain level of they needed to improve the blue line at the NHL level. That was something that had to be done. But they also had to improve the blue line in terms of their farm system, because all of their top prospects were forwards. And they've, you look at all the publications, they were a top 3 prospect pool, but the majority of them were forwards. And I got to give John Jaika credit for very quickly basically fixing both. I know that was the point of emphasis for the summer, but you go out and get Jacob Chychrun, you go out and get Anthony DeAngelo. They essentially traded a 2nd-round pick for him. He was the top prospect in Tampa Bay's system, and they were able to get him for a 2nd pick. So you get those 2. Now, as it turns out, they're already making an impact at the NHL level. So now you've helped out at the NHL level, but they're also young enough where they're going to be here for a while. It's that the blue line has been, in a lot of ways, a major bright spot for this team this year, I think, with the mindset that it's going to keep getting better.
Final thoughts?
I keep going back to the fact that all of these games are close, and I asked Dave Tippett about it today, and he said, yeah, I mean, there's a learning curve for these guys that when they're stuck in difficult situations, they're going to learn. It is like we've seen Jacob Chychrun out there in the final minutes of a 1-goal game the Coyotes are leading. That not only shows the confidence the coaching staff has in him, but there's also a level of let's see what this kid can do in this situation. It's different to be playing with 40 seconds left and the San Jose Sharks are desperately trying to tie the game, as opposed to you're playing 8 minutes a night and most of them are in the first, second period or whatever. And the Coyotes are playing against good teams in these games too. So I know people look at the standings and they're like, oh, well, we're in last in the Pacific Division. Played less games than everybody. The Coyotes are definitely on that short list of 3 or 4 teams around the league that are going to keep getting better all season. And one of the ways you get better is playing in close games every single night. And a lot of that, and I know we gave Mike Smith credit already, and he needs it. The way he's played, he absolutely deserves it. Louis Domingue, too, has kept them in a lot of these games.
I just want to underline what we discussed earlier in the podcast about this week and the next couple of days. Very exciting. It's going to be fun around here. There are going to be good games with Vancouver and Edmonton coming in. And I also want to remind people to keep an eye on Shane Doan, because he's approaching a very significant milestone that kind of got lost in the shuffle the other night when Brad Richardson was injured.
Yeah.
Shane is tied now with Thomas Steen for the most assists in franchise history. They both have 553. Thomas Steen, of course, retired. So Shane has a pretty good chance of taking over.
Good chance Thomas Steen's not going to get any more, and Shane Doan's probably going to.
And the cool thing is that Shane already owns the franchise record for goals with 397 and points 950.
Yeah, look, it's not breaking news either, but with all due respect to all the people that have played for this organization, it is fitting that Shane Doan's going to hold most of the major records, because he's been here every year that they've been in Arizona, and he's absolutely been the face of this franchise, and still is, I think. So we want to thank Doug Cannon for producing this, and for Dave Vest.
Happy Thanksgiving, Luke.
You know what, Dave? You too. That might be the nicest thing you've ever said to me.